All right, let's jump straight into today's explainer where we're looking at Chapter 1 of the Siddha Vedams titled Iswara Thatva. If you've ever felt like the search for meaning or the search for the divine is this exhausting outward chase, you are going to absolutely love this. We are digging into a philosophical text that completely flips the script. It shifts the search for the divine from the external world out there right back to our own internal breath. It's a massive shift in perspective, and we're going to break it down step by step.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering redefining the Almighty God, the mind as true guru, the two aspects of God, duality, Brahman and Maya, and wrapping up with the breath of life.
The source text kicks off with a really profound dialogue between a teacher and a disciple. The disciple essentially comes asking to be saved from the confusing ocean of illusions, what they call Maya, and wants to be taken to the Almighty God. And the teacher just stops him in his tracks with this challenging question: where do you actually look for God? It immediately forces us to question our own everyday assumptions about where ultimate reality actually lives.
Okay, Section 1. Redefining the Almighty God.
So the disciple initially thinks of God in terms of external worship, right? Specific deities with names and forms residing in temples. But the teacher uses this brilliant piece of logic. He asks, do you believe God is omnipresent? The disciple says yes. Well, the teacher points out that if God is truly omnipresent, everywhere, all at once, he literally cannot be limited to a specific name or form. And more importantly, if God is everywhere, that divine energy has to actually reside within us.
And that brings us to a pretty stark realization. The text argues that God isn't just an abstract concept. God is the foundational energy of life itself. The teacher says, think of a physical body that has passed away. It can't see, it can't hear, it can't speak. Why is that? It's because the divine energy has left it. So the really crucial takeaway here is that without this internal divine energy, we are essentially lifeless. We wouldn't even be able to perceive the world around us. God is the very mechanism of our knowing.
Moving on to Section 2, the mind as true guru.
If that divine energy is purely within us, who then is supposed to guide us on our spiritual path? Like, can God be a guru? The disciple naturally assumes so. It makes sense on the surface. But the teacher uses a sort of Socratic method to completely unravel this idea.
Let's break this down. When we speak of a guru, we almost always mean a person, right? An external entity separate from ourselves. But if God is omnipresent and within us, God cannot be a foreign external entity. If we place God outside of ourselves as a guru, we are essentially draining ourselves of that life energy, metaphorically turning ourselves into dead bodies. The text points out that when you wake up and suddenly have an idea, even the idea of needing a guru, where does that come from? It originates from your own thoughts. Just as a priest has the power to conceive and dedicate a temple, your mind has the power to generate the entire world you experience.
So, the ultimate conclusion of this logic is beautifully summarized in this quote. Since absolutely every concept you have stems from your own mind is your only true guide. There is no external guru. The whole shebang is generated from within.
All right, Section 3. The two aspects of God. You might be wondering, how exactly does this internal divine energy operate? Well, the text introduces two distinct states. First is Sakalathwam, which happens during our waking state. In this state, our life energy is flowing outward. We develop desires, hatreds, volitions, what the text calls blemishes. We are Saguna, which means with qualities. But then you have Nishkalathwam, representing the sleeping state. Here, the energy is absorbed completely inward. We become Nirguna, without qualities. The teacher gives a fascinating example. Take a cruel, hard-hearted person. When they're in deep sleep, their life energy has zero blemish. They're in a pure, untrammeled state of peace.
This all builds into a really ancient concept. Let's look at the Sanskrit phrase, Jiva Sivoham. It literally translates to, I am the Jiva in Siva. Life manifested in our busy, waking, outward state is Jiva. But when our life energy is kept completely latent, absorbed inward, and totally free of those waking qualities, just like in deep sleep, it is Siva, or Iswara. You are both the wandering life and the pure divine, and it depends entirely on where your energy is directed.
Let's dive into Section 4, Duality, Brahman, and Maya.
Contrary to popular belief, where we so often think everything comes from one single source, the teacher explains that the concept of one actually comes from two. You literally cannot have the idea of one thing without a beginning and an end to define it. To determine an object, it has to have a base to rest on, like the earth, and a void above it, like akasa, or heaven, to distinguish where it ends.
The text uses a seed as an example. For a seed to sprout, its outer cover has to split into two. Basically, you can't have creation without foundational dualities.
Now, before we can fully grasp how this dual universe is born, we need to define a foundational term, aksharam. This means the imperishable. It's the eternal, all-knowing real self that has absolutely no beginning and no end. But here is where the magic happens. This eternal self vibrates. And it is this very vibration of the self's energy that creates the dual conception of existence we just talked about.
When that imperishable self vibrates, you get the conception of a higher self and a lower self. Brahman is that higher self, which is actually a mental illusion born from the vibration. Maya is the lower self. So, we're not talking about external gods or spells here. We are talking about the internal vibrations of our own self. Maya isn't just the physical objects around us like people usually assume. Rather, Maya is the essential base from which all the things we hear, see, and know originate.
To make this concrete, the text grounds this heavy philosophy with a brilliant analogy. Picture a clay lamp. You make it, you set it on a table, you clean it, but you couldn't do any of those things without the earth it's made from. The earth is the essential base. You call the object a lamp, sure, you don't call it earth, but without the earth, that lamp simply cannot exist. In that exact same way, Maya is the essential base for all existence. Everything we see and experience rests entirely on Maya.
And yet, despite being the base of absolutely everything, the text defines Maya with this profound paradox. Maya is that which is not. It is the negation of the eternal, real self. It's transient, it's unreal, it represents ignorance. It is 100% essential for us to experience the world, but ultimately, when the vibration of the self subsides and we reach pure bliss, Maya just disappears into nothingness.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the breath of life.
So how does this vast cosmic philosophy connect to something you are doing right this very second? Well, the text concludes that the flow of breath is the sole indicator of life, and it's the generator of all our alertness and knowledge. The teacher makes a really simple observation. How do you know someone is alive and not dead when they're sleeping? Because their breath is flowing in and out. If you roll a sleeping person over, they might wake up and know what's happening. A dead body wouldn't. Therefore, the breath itself is the energy of life that enables the supreme knowledge within us to perceive reality.
It all comes down to the direction of this life energy. The teacher compares two concepts, Vayu and Samirana. When our supreme knowledge, our life energy, escapes and flows outward, it is called Vayu. This outward vibration creates the illusion of Maya. You get totally distracted by the external world. But when we concentrate that flow internally, it's called Samirana, which is union with the eternal reality. Think about a time when you tried to deeply recollect a forgotten thought. Your breath naturally concentrates within you, right? You become completely alert internally, to the point where someone could walk right past you and you wouldn't even notice. That internal concentration is the key to enlightenment.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought from the Siddha Vedam to chew on today. Every single moment, you are generating life energy. It's literally happening right now as you watch this explainer. The big question is, are you letting that breath, that vital energy, endlessly flow outward into the transient illusions of Maya, or are you consciously directing it inward to uncover the eternal divine reality that has been sitting inside you all along? The choice, according to the text, is entirely in your breath.